This is an ICO Alert podcast. I doubt, therefore I exist. Rene Descartes famously resolved to doubt everything. Should we do the same, even though doubt is the last letter of FUD? Join me as we look at 2,500 years of the wisest human thought to make better decisions and better products in the future of blockchain and cryptocurrency. I'm Peter Kay, and this is Bitgenstein's Table. I'm the Director of Globalization at ICO Alert. The views expressed on this podcast are my own or those of my guests, and not the views of ICO Alert or any other entity. Remember that none of this is specific financial advice. Don't base your decisions on it. This podcast is only for information and entertainment purposes, and I hope it helps you learn and enjoy life. Rene Descartes, or Rene Descartes, a very intelligent Frenchman from the 1600s, is considered by some to be the father of Western philosophy. That's probably a little too much, but we cannot deny his influence. He was the first loud voice of a generation of thinkers that moved away from basing everything in church dogma and tradition and moved towards a basis in reason. Descartes was not merely a philosopher. He was also the father of analytical geometry and a major figure in the scientific revolution. When you took algebra in school, you learned about the Cartesian plane and Cartesian coordinates, x and y values like 2, 3, and 14, -1. These math systems are named after Descartes. Charts and graphs and Pixar movies are all built on his coordinate system. Descartes is also the reason we use superscript for exponents in numbers like x squared, x cubed, x to the fourth, and so on. And though he didn't discover calculus, that was a later Cartesian philosopher Leibniz, along with Isaac Newton, Descartes' mathematical work was foundational to the discovery of calculus. But it's philosophy we're here to talk about, and philosophy also owes Rene Descartes a great debt. Descartes was a rationalist. He shifted the intellectual debate from the question, what is true, to the question, what can I be certain of based on reason? And so he, perhaps unintentionally, moved people's thinking from what does God say is true, what does the church say is true, to what can humans demonstrate is true. This was obviously a dramatic shift for society. It didn't take quite the same form in Britain. There, the minds whose thoughts would inspire America's founding fathers and the Constitution, these British thinkers were men like Thomas Hobbes, the tiger in the popular comic is named after him, John Locke, and David Hume. They have all had significant effects on your thinking and on your world that we'll consider in future episodes. Descartes was not an empiricist. He wrote at the beginning of the rationalist movement, often called continental philosophy. If we have to split philosophers from the early modern era into categories, calling most continental European philosophers rationalists and most English philosophers empiricists does the trick. Eventually this breaks down and movements like existentialism and analytic philosophy cut in. But anyway, back to Descartes, the rationalist. As he was beginning to study mathematics and physics at 11 years old, Descartes encountered the work of Galileo Galilei. Famous for inventing the telescope and discovering multiple moons, championing Copernicus's idea that the Earth orbited the Sun, conducting many scientific experiments, such as dropping things off the Leaning Tower of Pisa, and being the only Italian scientist to feature prominently in Queen's Bohemian Rhapsody, Galileo was still alive for most of the life of Rene Descartes. Descartes lived in multiple countries, including Sweden and France, but he did most of his writing during his 20-plus years in the Netherlands. This podcast is named after Ludwig Wittgenstein, a man admired for managing to revolutionize philosophy not once, but twice in the 20th century. But Descartes didn't just revolutionize philosophy. He revolutionized mathematics, too, and made serious contributions to science. From 1629 to 1633, Descartes worked on writing on these topics a book called Treatise on the World. But when Galileo was condemned by decision of the Catholic Church in 1633, Rene Descartes decided not to publish his book. Thankfully, 4 years later, in 1637, he published some of its material as a set of essays, preceded by an introduction, his famous Discourse on the Method, in an attempt to build a full foundation for knowledge. I think, therefore I am. Cogito ergo sum. It's the famous final conclusion of Rene Descartes' attempt to doubt everything, absolutely everything, until he reached some undoubtable basis, some solid foundation on which to build his view of the world. He figured that since he was doubting, a doubter must exist to do the doubting. So, stated differently, he concluded, I doubt, therefore, I exist. Of course, Descartes claimed to believe that a divine spirit revealed this new philosophy to him, though some now hold that he actually had an episode of exploding head syndrome. Yes, that's a thing. People experience loud, imagined noises as they are falling asleep or waking up. But no matter how loud the noise was in Descartes' head, it couldn't match the volume of the revolution that his thought caused around the world. Never to accept anything for true which I do not clearly know to be such. That is to say, carefully to avoid precipitancy and prejudice, and to comprise nothing more in my judgment than what is presented to my mind so clearly and distinctly as to exclude all ground of doubt. Rene Descartes doubted in a quest to be free of doubt. He wrote that he wanted to exclude all bias and just look at the facts. Did he? Is that really possible? Like Galileo, Descartes felt too threatened to publicly question some prevailing opinions. Perhaps he had internal inhibitions too, I don't know. It's difficult to question what everyone else believes. Just ask Lucas Goodwin from House of Cards. Just ask an activist whose views, despite having intelligent arguments for them, are still marginalized by much of society. A vegan activist, an intactivist in America, an anarcho-capitalist, or an anarcho-socialist. It's difficult to question what everyone else believes. And it can be difficult to question what you yourself believe. Only a bold, honest, remarkable person will question something that he or she believes and that everyone else believes at once. But cryptocurrency is a movement built on questioning, built on doubt. We doubt the honesty and stability of banks, governments, especially government monetary policy, and corporations. Some of the most traditionally trusted institutions in the world are among these groups. We doubt the traditional instruments of value, cash, gold, equity, bonds, things that hold value because people trust in them. When cryptocurrency was new and the Bitcoin price was measured in cents, telling someone about Bitcoin felt like telling them about veganism or paleo diet or intactivism or anarcho-capitalism or anarcho-socialism. You risked people thinking of you as strange, off balance, perhaps even a danger to society. People have become more receptive to all of these ideas now, but with Bitcoin, this receptivity has been fueled by a massive increase in value, in news coverage, in legitimate companies and apps and media presentations, in interest from celebrities. In many areas, the risk of being strange is still there, but it's much less now. Now things are shifting, but as I watch our new crypto communities, I'm not sure we're actually free to question everything. Question Bitcoin's capacity to become an asset of the future, and you're maybe a no-coiner. Question the wisdom of buying in, and you're a bear or behind the times. Question the honesty of a particular founder of Litecoin or Zcash or EOS or Ripple or Bitcoin Cash or Cardano or Verge or Tron, and you're a troll. Maybe you're trying to dump the market so that you can find a better entry point. Question whether decentralization will lead to slavery or the domination of crime rings or whatever, and you're a fudster. So often, your questions are not answered, but dismissed. This is even more true when you're questioning a product that's insecure about itself. Some argue that the Catholic authorities knew Galileo was right about the Earth revolving around the Sun, but they worried that admitting this all of a sudden would weaken the people's faith or the people's devotion. Others argue that Pope Urban VIII, whose position was weakening and whose life was full of court intrigue, had the trial presented to him by enemies of Galileo and was fearful of accusations that he would be weakening the Church by supporting the scientist. Either way, it was legitimate insecurity about its position that made the Church hostile to Galileo's questions. At ICO Alert, I sometimes write sponsored reports for clients running initial coin offerings. An essential part of these reports is the Q&A section. Sometimes a question will cut too deeply for an ICO to reply comfortably to. Why do you call yourself the first when there are several competitors who have been in business since 2014? Or maybe, how do you hope to capture any market share? Do you have a marketing plan? Even the question, what are your predictions for the cryptocurrency space in general, will sometimes be shunned. Not answering these questions is a mistake. Questions are opportunities. Dismiss the hard questions. Dismiss all the doubters. And those who agree with you will laugh and cheer, of course. But if you answer a hard question well, those who agree with you will be inspired, and those who disagree with you will be challenged, and those on the fence might just be converted. A hard question is an opportunity. Hard questions unresponded to, though, are a grave threat. If a project can't answer hard questions, it might not survive. Descartes arguably trolled the prevailing dogma and worldview of his day from within. Questioning the quid pro quo, standing up for truth and right and knowledge from within, can indeed have terrible effects. Galileo was condemned to house arrest. Lucas Goodwin was shot Countless journalists around the world have been quietly killed for exposing the truth. Colonel von Stauffenberg and his co-conspirators were executed. The most significant early Western philosopher, Socrates, asked questions without ceasing. He annoyed people so much by asking them if they truly knew what goodness or love or justice were. Eventually, the people of Athens condemned him to exile or death. Socrates drank hemlock. It's possible that Descartes suffered a similar fate. One professor at the University of Erlangen, Theodor Ebert, holds that it was arsenic in communion wafers that killed Descartes at 53 years old, not natural causes. Professor Ebert pins a priest with the motive, since the priest was a missionary attempting to convert the Swedish queen to Catholicism. The Swedish queen had brought Descartes to her court because of his widespread fame, but perhaps his ideas would not have been compatible with her conversion. The professor also finds that Descartes' recorded final requests as he approached his time of death sounded like those of a man being poisoned. Perhaps Descartes joins the long list of those who asked one question too many. Maybe they should have been more careful, but was it worth it to stand up for right and truth? Philosophy has a long history of questioning things. The first philosopher, Thales, said everything was made of water. That sounds ridiculous, but it was an attempt at explaining nature using natural means. Socrates questioned the nature of goodness and beauty and truth. Descartes tried to question everything. Philosophy since has questioned even more, and the development of law and science and math and technology and astronomy and biology and sociology and psychology are all advanced by people posing questions. Every good journal article starts with a question. Every good sales and startup pitch starts with a problem. Innovation relies on things not done before, and in order to do things differently, you need to question the way things have always been done. Of course, believing in something is a powerful force. Belief is thought to be the opposite of doubt. Faith in a product, in a company, in a cryptocurrency, in a trend, in an ideology is essential for the success of that thing. Nothing worthwhile can move forward without confidence, without faith, but to really have faith in something, we often must pass through doubting it. That's one key difference between being confident and being naive. Between the arrogant young startup founder devoted to a bad idea and the young entrepreneur about to change the world. Questioning, doubt, is essential on the journey. Often we give it less disassuring buzzwords to hide behind: analysis, brainstorming, adapting, pivoting. None of these are possible without doubting where we are at and doubting where we are going. I know I'm changing the meaning of Descartes' statement here, but the movement he unleashed on the world existed because he doubted. Likewise, powerful companies only exist because they doubted, because they questioned. Socrates famously said, allegedly at his trial, "The unexamined life is not worth living." By extension, the unexamined product is not worth building. The unexamined white paper is not worth trusting. The unexamined market advice is not worth following. The unexamined team is not worth investing in. The unexamined ideology is not worth fighting for. The unexamined future is not worth working towards. Examine, question, doubt, and allow others to do the same. Thanks for listening. This is a cross-post episode, so if you enjoyed it, go subscribe to Bitgenstein's Table on your favorite podcast platform. And please leave your measurement of my podcast to help others decide whether to take the time to listen. You could even leave a review. I'm on Twitter, and Medium as Bitgenstein. And I want to hear from you, especially if you would like to join the podcast as a guest and discuss crypto philosophy. Bitgenstein's Table and the music on it are researched, written, recorded, and produced by me, Peter Kay, with the exception of the original theme song by Joseph Dickinson. All of the piano songs I perform this week are by French composer Maurice Ravel. Next week, we'll be looking at and analyzing the philosophy of a specific cryptocurrency. Next week on Bitgenstein's Table, the Crypto Philosophy Podcast.